Welcome to the show. This is the 2022 Dickson County Election Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Spurlock, and I host a radio show every Saturday morning on WDKN, and I also write a newspaper article every Wednesday in the Dickson Post about local history. And sort of the motivation behind this particular podcast was to give the voters of Dickson County a little more information about the candidates. So I wanted to bring some people in, let them sit down and have a conversation with them without any limits to any type of shows, so we can kind of sit here and talk as long as we want. And I'm excited this morning because we have a great guest in the studio with us who is running for the Tennessee State House of Representatives, District 69 seat, which is currently vacant. Hopefully we can talk about that in a little bit, but I've got Jody Barrett here with me this morning. Jody, how are you?
I'm great, Justin. Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it, man. It's a joy to have you in the studio. I've really enjoyed doing this podcast, just getting to talk to some different people who are running for office, and I look forward to talking to you today about a lot of the different things that are going on with this particular seat, because there's some different things that have happened, and I hope to get your comments on that in a few minutes. But usually like to start off the show by giving the candidates an opportunity to talk just a little more about themselves. A lot of people see the signs and they see your name, and then to some people you're just a name, but we'd like to give you a chance to explain who the person is behind those signs. And so tell us a little bit about your early life and where you grew up, and just some childhood memories.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Sometimes you take for granted the fact that I've lived here my entire life and grown up here, and you think everybody knows you, especially with what I do with Dickson Title in my law office. So, having the opportunity to kind of give my backstory is important, particularly for the voters in Hickman and Lewis County who may not have had as much exposure to me in my business practices. I was born in Hickman County. That's one thing I'm pretty proud to point out, particularly in this race. I'm the only candidate that has ties to Hickman County in that way. My parents moved here from up north back in the late 60s with the dream to be music stars and farmers, just like a lot of people,
Really?
Come down and start a ranch and play music, get into the business. And so they did that on Spring Creek in Bon Aqua in East Hickman. Actually had a place right across the creek and the railroad tracks from Johnny Cash's place. So they used to tell stories about running into them and the creek crossings and all that stuff. So, and then, that sounds all nice and wonderful, but then life happens, and after that, kind of my life becomes a little bit of a country music song itself. And mom and dad were divorced shortly after I was born, probably within a year and a half or 2 years of me being born. And he ran off with the money and sold all the farm equipment and left mom with 4 mouths to feed and no income or anything like that to support herself. And so that's what kind of pushed us to Dickson County. And we had she had some really good support from local folks. The Hogan family was a huge support to her and our family through that difficult time, trying to find a place to live, get started with new work and all of that. Jackie and Hudson and May were all great. We ended up living in Ravenwood is where we landed, and that was a house that Jackie had built. That subdivision back in the early 70s, and that's where I lived until I graduated high school. So have always kind of been part of this district, lived in this district. South of the interstate was my stomping grounds. And for the early part of my childhood, spent a lot of time as the youngest of 4 kids riding around with my mom. As she used to say that for a long time, she had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a Jody attached to her. So that was always fun. She drove back and forth to Nashville a lot to do work with insurance agencies and different things. And honestly, during that time, she was kind of doing anything she could to kind of keep food on the table, just like a lot of people in this district. One of the interesting stories I tell is that she, one of her multiple jobs that she did, she drove tour buses for the Hemphill Brothers out of Nashville. So my early childhood was spent a lot of times on the front steps of a Silver Eagle tour bus driving all over the country. First time I ever went to Disney World was with Bootsy Collins. She was driving the bus for him. Well, she was his regular driver that he requested all the time. So somewhere around 76 or so, 76, 77, you got 6'5" or 6 tall Bootsy Collins walking through the Magic Kingdom with a little white kid on his shoulders. It was an interesting time. Did a Canadian tour through a summer with Manhattan Transfer, and they had this huge following with their band where they played softball everywhere they went. So every tour stop was a concert and a softball tournament against some local team or something. So
wow,
things like that were
that's entertaining.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I tell everybody too that that's how I learned to read and write, was sitting on the front steps. I guess I was the original homeschooler, sitting on the front steps of that bus with my mom and reading maps, doing county mile markers and doing math to figure out where the next exit was and all of those things. And so when I ended up going to school, I kind of bypassed kindergarten. I could already read and write and do those things. And so went into first grade at Burns Elementary a year ahead. And it was a good time.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to spend your childhood, but it sounds like you had a lot of fun with it.
It was. My mom was a unique individual. Anybody that had any impact or contact with Bonnie Barrett over the years knows that she was a very interesting person, jack of all trades, kind of did everything, capable of doing anything. And so lots of people that have come up to me over the years to tell stories about, hey, let me tell you, first time I met your mom, she was under a car changing her own oil, and I thought that was the craziest thing in the world for a woman to change her own oil. And so, things like that. She was a cool chick.
Talk to me a little bit about your high school days, because those folks that are listening know that, most of them anyway, know that I'm a high school teacher over at Dickson County High School, and I had the pleasure of getting to go there, way back in the day, and it was a good experience for me, and I understand that, you went there and played sports, and just talk real briefly about that. And I think you were friends with a guy who plays guitar now and sings a little bit, who also went there. Well,
and he's one of many friends that from those classes that have gone on to do some pretty cool stuff. So, I mentioned that I started at Burns Elementary. I had some amazing teachers, Laverne Fisher, Penny Bagby, and Barbara Easley. Of course, Kenneth Fuzzle and Miss Whitaker were in charge of Old Burns back in the day, but came all the way through public schools in Dickson County. Dickson Middle School, which was James E. Sullivan Middle School at the time, now the 9th grade annex, and then Dickson Junior High, and then finally at the high school. But yeah, class of 1992, had about 515 or so graduating students. It was a big class. Mm-hmm. We still like to say that we were the best class to ever come through Dickson County. We have our 30th reunion coming up in September. We just booked the date and everything. So 30 years for the class of 92. But going back and again to me starting a year early in school, I had the benefit of having 2 real classes that I was connected to. I stayed in that class all the way through 6th grade, and then again, my mom being who she was, when I got to 6th grade, that's when boys start maturing a little bit, and as an athlete, she knew that I was going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball if I was a year younger than everybody. And it's not only that, but also emotional development and educational development, the whole 9 yards. And so she wanted me to be held back 1 year, even though I had straight A's, held me back, let me do 6th grade again so that I get with kids that are my own age. So the class of 91 is also a group that I have a lot of ties to. So you mentioned the guy with the guitar, John Rich, obviously. He and I have been really good friends since my senior year when he moved in, but there are other folks that have gone on to do great things like Anson Mount and others, and so we just had a really solid group of kids back in that time, and part of that's just, a great group of educators.
Talk to me a little bit now about what you do for a living. After high school, we all have to kind of move on and figure out what we're going to do with our life, right? So talk to me a little bit about the transition from high school. What did you do after that, and how did you kind of end up doing the profession that you do now?
Sure. So I had an uncle or have an uncle still, that was a criminal defense attorney in South Florida. And we used to go down and spend some time with him in the summers because it was a nice place to get away to, and you could go stay at his house for a week or so during the summertime. And he was kind of an inspiration for me to pursue a law career. So I kind of knew early on, probably 8th or ninth grade, I knew that was something that I wanted to pursue. And as we all get into college, we figure out if that's accurate or not, or if we find some other path that we're drawn down. So I went to Lincoln Memorial University. When I graduated high school, I will readily admit that I was not an exemplary scholar. We'll just put it that way. I was distracted by other things, mostly sports, also my girlfriend, and so there are things that were more important to me at the time. But when I graduated, I kind of was at the point where I had two choices. I could either, and these were choices that were presented to me by my mother. You either get a scholarship to pay for your school, or you're going into the Air Force. Those are your two choices, because we were not a wealthy family, so it was not an open option for me to go anywhere I wanted to go, no matter what the cost. So buckled down pretty hard my senior year, and was fortunate to get a golf scholarship and an academic scholarship based on my ACT results to go to Lincoln Memorial University in East Tennessee. Small NCAA Division II school in the middle of nowhere, Cumberland Gap, Tennessee, right on the border of Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia, and just loved it. A small school gave me an opportunity to do a lot of things I would never been able to do at a larger school. So as we sit here doing this radio thing and recording, while I was in school at LMU, I was able to, even though I was a history major, had nothing to do with a communications degree, I was able to work at the television station. Did news production and stuff while we were there. I was a DJ for the radio station. I did color commentary and play-by-play for local high school sports and for some of the college teams. I was public address announcer in the arena there, with 5,000 seat arena.
Wow.
So all of those things were things that I had an opportunity to do at a small school that never would have been able to do at a 25,000, 30,000 student school. Ended up also running for becoming student government president while I was there. Probably my first taste of any political action. And interestingly enough, the current director of elections for the state of Tennessee is Mark Goins. Mark was the guy that passed the gavel to me. He was student government president at LMU right before I came in. So
pretty cool.
Nice little connection there. And I love talking to Mark, get to see him and talk to him about once or twice a year. So I'm looking forward to seeing him more on the Hill.
Talk to me a little bit about golf, because, Dixon has really sort of gained a reputation as a golf town in a lot of ways. And I wrote a newspaper article, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago about this. I sort of wanted to figure out, how did golf start around here? And one of the things that I learned was actually that the first golf course in Dixon was not the old country club. A lot of people think it was. It was actually an old course out by the interstate where like Old Charlie's and Colton's and those restaurants are now. And then, of course, the golf course developed over here at the country club. And then, not too long ago, we get Greystone, and then let's not forget the great course we have out at Montgomery Bell. But we've had a lot of guys get golf scholarships here lately and go on to do great things in golf. But if you go back about 30 years, you were kind of one of the first guys to get a golf scholarship. And talk to me a little bit about, going to college and playing golf. And I know you kind of mess around with golf now, doing some things on the side. And maybe talk just real briefly about that.
Sure. Just to finish up the education part of things too, when I left LMU, I went to Ole Miss for law school. So met my wife at LMU. We were married between the first and second semesters of law school. So she moved down to Mississippi with me after that, worked on campus while I finished school.
Ole Miss is a beautiful campus, by the way.
It's great. I'm very happy that I went there as a married man. I might have been a little too distracted with a good time at Oxford. It's easy to have a good time down there. So, I was grounded. I was focused on what I needed to do and was able to get through law school and do well. So that all worked out for me. But golf, getting back to that. So I was not aware that there was a golf course out by the interstate. That's new to me. I'm going to be interested to see what you find out about that.
I find some crazy stuff out, and that's one thing I was able. It was actually, this is a kind of a connection to you, so I'll mention it real quick. But it was actually a guy who was represented us up at the State House, who actually created that golf course after playing golf with his buddies up in Nashville. So he'd go up to Nashville, lawmaker, do some stuff like that. And I guess maybe it was a form of recreation, or maybe they had meetings out on the golf course. I'm not sure, but he kind of got a love for golf. And so, when he came home down here to Dixon, he thought maybe we should get a golf course going. And so he built a small golf course, and he let everybody from Dixon come play. And it developed a love around here when we got enough people together that really wanted a golf club. That's when you get the old country club around the 1920s,
right? Late
1920s going into the 30s. But there was actually W.O. Hake. I can't remember if he was a state senator, House of Representatives. I don't have the notes in front of me, but he was a lawmaker.
Well, there's another connection to lawmaking and this position that I'm running for with how the Montgomery Bell Golf Course got built. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but former Judge Leonard Martin was also a state representative. I believe he was a representative for 2 terms. In his second term, he became the majority leader, House Majority Leader. And Leonard's goal while he was there was to get that golf course built at Montgomery Bell. So,
wow.
And he recently came in, he and Miss Betty came in to see me and were telling that story. So interesting how, this position that I'm running for has a close tie to the golf community here. You mentioned my experience. I played in high school, and we had a great team. James Michael Register, Clay Blackburn, Rob Milam, several other guys, and I'm going to leave people out, so I apologize for that. But I wasn't the first, golf prodigy, and I hardly a prodigy. Let me go ahead and clear that up too. Better than average, but not special by any means. Bob Walcott is obviously the name of golf around here, and it's funny. I grew up going to Bob's camp at the Dixon Country Club whenever I was 10, 11, 12 years old. Is kind of when I started playing and got into it. I was a baseballer growing up, just like most of us, and played a lot of baseball. And then my mom remarried when I was 9, and they got into golf and going around playing in all these Jack and Jill events and stuff. And so because they got into it, I got into it, and turned out I had a talent for it, and much to Valton Potter's chagrin, who used to yell at me all the time for swinging it like I was playing golf instead of playing baseball. So I heard that a lot during practices. But ended up getting a scholarship. We had a great team. We just missed out on going to state my senior year. We had a playoff at in Swan Lake in Clarksville against Clarksville High School. Ended up going out, all 5 players on both teams playing off against each other, and we missed it by 1. So that was one of my biggest disappointments. But in addition to golf, I also played soccer while I was in high school as well. And I know you have a little connection to some soccer around here.
I love soccer.
Yeah.
And, I've seen your name in the locker room. They have, guys who went on to college who played soccer here or something along those lines. And one of the first ones is yourself. I think you were playing soccer on one of the first teams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was. So I played baseball all the way up to high school, and even tried out for the high school baseball team. Played all-stars and all that. Was one of the better baseball teams in the county, or baseball players in the county. But had an accident when I was 15 out on Pinewood and on Highway 48 at the old Pinewood store. Really messed up my ankle and had to go through some rehab for that. And it was that summer leading into my sophomore year, because at the time Dixon County High School was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So 9th graders weren't allowed to play sports up at the high school. Tried to play as a 9th grader on the golf team, but they wouldn't let me do that. So tried out for baseball and just didn't have a very good tryout. Wasn't physically back yet for that, and so went and talked to Coach Randy Bryson, who it was his first year as the baseball coach, and I told him, I said, Coach, I said, I wish you'd ask around to some of the other coaches that I've had, call Coach Potter and some other folks, that Dysinger and some others that have been around me. Explain the situation. He's like, well, son, I got to go by what I saw based on tryouts, and so this is the team I'm going to go with. Just get yourself better, get stronger, and come back next year. And I said, well, if I don't play baseball, I'm going to play something, because I'm an athlete. I got to have something to do.
Right.
So they started soccer that year, 1990. It was the first year for soccer at Dixon County High School. Wade Daniel and Jay Pallas were the coaches. Neither one of them, and they'll tell you this, they had no idea what a soccer ball was or how it worked. If you watch soccer now, or a certain show that's on Netflix that everybody likes to watch, it's the same thing. They didn't know what the rules were. They didn't know how the field's set up, what positions were, anything. And so, and parents were giving them books like, hey, just read this. This will get you the basics of what you need to know. But we ended up with a lot of football players that the football coaches just wanted them to be in shape. So, hey, go play soccer and run around for a spring. Don't hurt yourself. And then you'll be ready for summer practice whenever we get ready to go. So we were probably a little more aggressive soccer team than most. We did like some physical contact based on the roster that we had, but my one claim to any type of Dixon County High School athletic history or fame is that I did score the first goal for Dixon County High School soccer.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah. We played.
It's a cool distinction to have.
At Clarksville Northwest High School. We were playing up there, and we had a penalty. I'm sure we were getting drilled. I think it was 3 or 4-0 or something at the time. Had a penalty called, and Eric Runlett, who also ended up being our quarterback for our high school team at that time. Eric took the penalty kick and bounced it off the crossbar. Came back to me, trapped it, and knocked it in. So first goal in the history of Dixon County High School soccer.
That's awesome. That's a cool story.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got to pull that out of you this morning. Talk to me a little bit. Now, we've gone over your history and growing up here in Dixon County, and I appreciate you sharing that with me, because I learned some stuff today that I didn't know about. But talk to me a little bit about your professional life. You're a businessman. You have business here in town. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I am a lawyer. I said I went to law school at Ole Miss. But I like to tell people that I'm a businessman with a law degree, because nobody likes to tell lawyer jokes more than me. So I own Dixon Title. Anybody that's done real estate transactions, bought or sold a house or refinanced their loan, there's a decent chance they've come through my office. And that office was started back in the early 70s by Larry Ramsey. Again, his wife, Dana Ramsey, many people know either through Education Edge or as a teacher. They had her as a teacher in junior high. I had her myself for journalism and Spanish. And so Larry started his practice and came here, I believe, originally in '73 with Roger White and Barney Region, and then left to go on his own. Had his first office up on the arcade on Main Street, and so Larry ended up focusing his practice on real estate. And so when the time came for me to come back to Dixon, I started looking while I was in Mississippi. My wife and I were expecting our first child, and nothing was really open up here, didn't get an opportunity to come back. And so we're in Mississippi in January of 2001, and I had just taken a new position with a firm in Grenada that did a lot of highway right-of-way work for Mississippi Department of Transportation. Been there about 6 weeks, and I get a random phone call from Larry Ramsey out of the blue. And I'd never talked to him before personally. I just had come in and dropped my resume off. And it turns out it was exactly 1 year to the day that I dropped my resume off at his office. And he called me up, said, "Hey, are you still looking to come to Dixon?" I said, "Well, I could be, depending upon what you're thinking." And so we had a conversation, drove up here for the weekend and met with Larry. And at the time, Eric Thornton had been with him for a couple of years. And so met with both of them, and an offer was made. We worked out some arrangements on that. And so this is my story that I tell everybody, that if you ever question whether or not God is involved in your life, let me just tell you how these things work. That phone call randomly from 1 year to the day after I dropped my resume off, end of January, met with them, had to take the bar exam again for Tennessee because I'd not been practicing long enough. I'd taken and passed the Mississippi bar and was practicing there, but I had to take the Tennessee bar again. I had 2 weeks to prepare for it. Wow. Been out of school for 2 years, hadn't looked at any materials in 2 years. I promise you, I tried to forget everything I could about the bar exam. So took it again, passed the bar. We sold a house in Mississippi, bought a house in Tennessee that my wife never saw because she was pregnant with our first child, had a baby, moved, closed on our new house, and started work with Larry on May 1st. All of that happened in that compressed period of time. And when you look back behind you at all the doors that opened up and all the things that had to happen in order for that to come to fruition, that's when you know that God is for real and He's working in your life.
Absolutely. So it sounds like, you kind of built a pretty good life here. You started your family and you made your way back to Dixon, and title company's doing well. And
law practice, title company, everything's great. Been partners with Eric Thornton now for 21 years. We got some really great young lawyers working with us now, Jordan Osborne and Sidney Franklin, both Creekwood graduates, Creekwood superstars, actually. They're both extremely intelligent, and I can tell you the same thing I've told everybody else that I've run into. The best thing you can do as an employer is hire people smarter than you, and preferably better than you. So, and I've done that with those two. They're fantastic. So outside of that, I have a lot of other business interests as well, a lot of real estate development. We've developed the Crestview Office Park, the Rite Aid building where we're in now, where we've just moved our new offices to, done a lot of those things. And you mentioned a second ago a golf business that I've started. So I've probably got about, I don't know, eight or nine different companies formed that I'm a part of, but those are my main ones are going to be the law office and the title company, and then now this golf business that we've started as well.
And also, you're running for office, so that could change things ultimately. Talk to me a little bit about why you decided to run, because you like you've already mentioned, you have a good life here, you have a good business. There's 2 great golf courses here that you could go spend all your time playing golf at, but you've decided to get involved in the government and throw your hat in for this particular seat. And so I'm kind of curious. Now, some people have a particular event that happens where they decide, the time is now, I've decided to run. Other people, it's something they thought about for a while and then sort of evolves over time and then maybe decide this is the right time. But take me through that motivation. What sort of pushed you to run for this office?
Well, look, I think I'm a lot like most of the people in this district in that I kind of have focused on the stuff I can control for a long time. For 21 years now, I've been trying to take care of my family, put food on their table, put a roof over their head, go to work every day, keep my head down, and really kind of just tend to keep to myself, right? Our law office has been involved, and I've been involved in some local politics. We were county attorneys from 2002 to 2006. During that time, I was the school board attorney. That was my role as one of the partners. Eric and Larry kind of handled more of the county side of things, and I said, guys, I'll take care of the school board. Represented the school board for 4 years and didn't charge them a dime to do that. It was all included in our contract with the county. So that's kind of an example of my dedication to the school system in our county as a whole. But had some experience there. We've represented the housing authority, I'm the industrial development board attorney. We do the delinquent taxes for the county as well. So I've been on the outskirts, right, in more of a support role, and have never really felt the need to step forward in an elected position. And just eventually, I think we all kind of get to the point that we take a break and look up from the work that we're doing every day and look around us and see what's going on and realize, things are not going the way they should be going, and somebody needs to do something about it. And usually that's what we say, right? Well, somebody needs to do something about this.
Right.
And that somebody needs to be somebody else.
Right.
And in this situation, with the way things have worked out with Mr. Curcio stepping down, leaving only 15 days before the filing deadline to run for this office, there was a scramble and a void of leadership. And anytime there's a void of leadership, then some other leader has to step into that role. And I felt like I wasn't sure that anybody else was going to do it that would do the job justice and serve the people the way that they needed to be served. And so talked to my wife, talked to my law partners and other people that I trust, and decided let's do this. Let's step up. It's time to make a difference.
So this is something that you've decided to do. So you obviously have, done your research and you know a little bit about the office. So talk to me a little bit about, what is this particular office that you're running for. It's the Tennessee State House of Representatives. For somebody who's listening that doesn't know the difference between, that particular position and maybe a county mayor or a county commissioner or the mayor of Charlotte, explain, what exactly is that?
Right. Well, if you take it in each level, federal, state, and local levels, they each have their different branches of government. So for the executive branch, you're going to start out president in the federal level, and then you're going to come down to a governor of the state, and then your county mayor is your local. If you want to break it down even further, then you go to city mayor. So Bob Riles, the county mayor, Donnie Weiss is the mayor of the city of Dixon. And then the Congress side of that, for the legislative body in Tennessee, we have a legislature as well. It's the Tennessee General Assembly that has two houses, just like you have a Senate and a House at the federal level. In Tennessee, you have a Senate and a House as well. And so the position I'm running for is House of Representatives. Again, it's the 69th district that represents the people of Lewis County, Hickman County, and about 2/3 of Dixon County. And, the legislative body in Tennessee, the General Assembly, is just that. It's the legislative body that proposes laws, adopts laws, approves the governor's proposed budget, all of those things.
Tell me real briefly, how does the work that you do up there in Nashville at the state level sort of affect us down here in Dixon?
Well, it affects you in every way. Everything the General Assembly does has an effect on our day-to-day life, whether that's our tax structure, our gas taxes, our food taxes, sales taxes, all of that. And then the policies that they put in place. Now, those policies may affect us in many different ways. There's education policy that affects how our school systems run and operate, or even how they're funded. There's policy with regards to social issues, whether that's, again, some of the more hot button topics that are out there that we deal with on a regular basis, whether that's abortion or LGBTQ issues, all of that. And then there's also criminal laws and how we're going to deal with folks in the criminal justice system and all of that. So the legislature is doing stuff every year that affects us directly, whether we see it on the front end or not. It is directly impacting the way we live our lives.
Tell me about your qualifications. That's, to actually run for the office, you don't have to do a whole lot. You have to maybe live here, be a certain age. There's not that many official qualifications for the office, but when people go to the polls, they want to know about your qualifications and what makes you think, that you'd be be good at this particular job. What is it about your background, maybe the jobs that you've done in the past, or maybe even just about your personality or characteristics that would make you the right person for this particular spot?
Well, I think the biggest thing is what I've done for a living for 21 years. Nobody really likes lawyers unless they really need one. But the one thing about practicing law is it does prepare you for being a representative, because that's what I do for a living all day, every day, is I represent people. They come to me with their problems and their disputes or issues or needs, and they need someone to represent them and help them, guide them through that process and come up with a solution. So for 21 years, I've had people come to me, ask me to represent them and help them solve a problem. And what I've tried to do over that time period, and what I've learned in years and years now, things that I wasn't very good at in the beginning that I'm better at now, is drilling down to ask the right questions to figure out what the real issue is, rather than addressing the symptom, which is two people yelling at each other over a fence line. Is let's drill down and find out what the real issue is. And if we can solve the real issue and address that, then you're not going to have all of these ancillary problems that continue to fester. So that's the first thing, is my training and trying to figure out exactly what real problem is, the root cause of what's happening, and then representing them to the best of my ability, even if it's they want to go in a direction that I don't think is best for them. At the end of the day, I represent them. I don't, they're not my employees. I can't direct them to do what I think they should do. If they want me to take them down a path to trial when I think that they should probably settle, then that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and fight for them as hard as I can. So that 20-year career of doing that all day, every day, whether it's either been in the courtroom or it's been sitting at the closing table and fighting for people to get the best deal they can possibly get and make sure the paperwork's done and they're not getting taken advantage of, then that's where my experience comes in, and I think it prepares me for this. I've also worked with the legislature before. I was a legislative intern while I was in college, so I worked with the House Calendar and Rules Committee for a year for the 99th General Assembly. So I've been up there, and I've seen how the sausage is made. I kind of know how the sharks swim around up there and have a firsthand experience of kind of what I'm getting into. And I think that's unique for the people that are running for this position. I think that's something that sets me apart, is I do kind of know what I'm getting myself into.
Tell me, when people decide to run for office, there's usually something that happens as far as they see something and they think, I'd like to do that differently, or I'd like to change that. And so as you're running for this office and you're thinking about ways that you could do things differently, I guess I just wonder, what would you do maybe different from the previous office holder? Maybe, the guy who held the position before you specifically, or even in general, about maybe a way that you would approach this job that nobody's ever approached it before. And I'll go ahead and say this. There's been a lot of talk about lobbyists, because the person who was in the seat that you're running for came out not long ago and declared that he was going to become a lobbyist. And some people talk about, taking money from lobbyists, and some people out there may not even know what we're talking about. But you made a post and you said that, you were going to return some money because it was coming from a lobbyist. And so you sort of taken a position on that. And so I wonder if you could just kind of tell me what you would do differently, and maybe specifically speak to that, just because it's something that people have been talking a lot about lately.
Right. Well, look, lobbyists are important. They're part of the legislative process. They represent a group of people that have a special interest that pertains to them. And just about every industry, including the real estate industry, you're a real estate agent, realtors have a lobby. And they hire a firm that goes to the legislature and visits with legislative members of the legislature to ask them to support or push forward on bills that affect them, or vote against bills that they think will be negatively impactful. So there's nothing wrong with lobbyists. The issue is when the lines get blurred, when legislators become so tied financially to the lobbyists that they work with that they can't be neutral, or they can't be objective about an issue. And so, yes, Mr. Curcio came to visit me a couple weeks ago, and he was very gracious, offering to help in any way he could, and I'm very appreciative. First of all, I think Michael did a fantastic job during his term. If I can be as communicative with the district as he was, as far as answering phone calls and emails and text messages and being responsive, then I will be doing very well. So I give him total props for the way that he's handled himself while he was there. I haven't always agreed with the way he's voted. I'm sure he's got reasons for what he's done, but or the way he's fallen on certain issues. But I tend to be more conservative than Michael was. Pretty conservative in the way that I approach the social issues and the financial issues as well. So when he came to visit, he offered to make a donation to my campaign, said he was making the same donation to all of the Republican candidates in this race, in which I was understood, and thanked him for that. And then the following Monday is when it became apparent to the public, or became public knowledge, that he had joined the lobbyist firm, Talbert firm, and had resigned his position as legislator, which leaves us now unrepresented. And, immediately my first thought was, well, I can't keep this money now. He's now going to be coming back as a lobbyist and coming to me and hopefully me, if I win this election, and asking me to support things that his firm is representing, or work with him on certain issues. And I don't want there to be any appearance that I'm obligated. I mean, it's only $500 check, but it doesn't matter the size. It's the principle. And the principle of the matter is I didn't think it was appropriate for me as a candidate to accept money from somebody who is now currently active as a lobbyist. And I want to come into the legislature with a clean slate, with no ties to any one firm or entity or special interest or whatnot. And I want to be directly tied to my district, and those are the people that I'm obligated to, not to people who are giving me money or trying to steer me in a different direction.
Let me ask you, you mentioned something there about, Mr. Curcio vacating his seat. He had announced that he wasn't going to, run for re-election, but I think we all assumed that he would go ahead and finish out the term. But then when he decided to, vacate, it now has put the county commission in a position where they can choose to fill that seat. My understanding is next week, I believe it's next Monday night, I think it's June the 20th, if I remember correctly, they are going to vote to fill that seat. And at this point in time, we don't know exactly what they're going to do. Would you talk just a little bit about your reaction to that whole thing?
Sure. I can understand why our county commission and our county mayor would want to replace Curcio, make sure that we had somebody in place. If there was something pressing in the state legislature, or there was some real chance that there was going to be a special called session. So just so that your listeners know, the legislature has adjourned for the summer. They won't reconvene until January. So there's no business being done at the state level right now. This is what they call the meet and greet season for everybody, and it's an election year. So everybody's out meeting with their constituents, going to all the different bean suppers and fish fries and all that stuff. So the governor and the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor have all said there's not going to be a special called session. There's nothing coming up down the pike this summer. So I do question why we would need to take action right now to put somebody in this spot. I mean, who's essentially going to get paid the state legislature or legislative salary, which I think is $22,000 a year or something like that. They're going to get paid for 4 months to really not do anything. They're not going to be in session. They would be eligible to get a stipend to drive back and forth to the office in Nashville, and food stipend and all that stuff that any member of the General Assembly is entitled to. So, I'm sure that there's some explanation for it, and I hope that it will be discussed at the meeting, and nominations will be made, and hopefully, if they decide to go for it, hopefully they put somebody solid in there that has the best interest of the people at heart.
And I think we'll all be watching to kind of see what they do, and so that'll be happening on Monday night, and I'm curious, as you are as well. I appreciate you answering all my questions. We've gotten pretty deep into the interview now. We know a lot about you, and you've answered all of my sort of general questions about, why you're running and why you're qualified and things like that. But is there any, anything else that you want the voters to know about you? Maybe talk about your most important political issues or your platform.
Well, I do want to address some concerns that have been raised by my opponents, maybe by other people. I don't know. I am a homeschool dad. My wife and I made the decision whenever our oldest daughter Avery was reaching school age that we wanted to give it a go and see how that worked for us. We made sacrifices to be a single income family so that my wife could stay home and try that. And the decision was, well, we'll do this for as long as we think that she's getting the education that she needs. And if we feel like she's falling behind or not getting social issue, development or educational development, anything along those lines, then we'll put her in school. So there was never been a decision made by me or my family with regards to homeschooling that had anything to do with a negative connotation or a negative opinion of our local school system. There are others that are trying to paint me as anti-public schools. And nothing could be further from the truth. At the end of the day, I'm a citizen, I'm a business owner. There's no way whatsoever that I benefit from our public school system not being effective and fantastic and being as good as it can possibly be. The opposite is true. I have every motivation in the world for our school system to be top notch in every single way, and I have supported that. My actions show that I have supported that, both financially with donations that I've made and my time. There's not been a single person in the school system that hasn't called me or my office and asked us to support something that we weren't willing to do. So I want to make sure that I clear that up. The other part of this is the motivation behind us doing homeschooling was we wanted to have a Christian-based education for our children. And honestly, that just wasn't available in Dixon at the time. Certainly not through the school system because of the government laws that are in place that prevent that. But there's not a real private school option here. We weren't going to drive to McEwen or Nashville in order to do that. And so that we felt like the best option for us was to go that route. And what that has kind of taught me or shown me over the 20 years now that we've been doing that, or 18 years that we've been doing that, is that there's no one-size-fits-all education option for every family or every child. And the more options that are available for families to choose what is in their best interest for their family and for their child, I think is good. And so I support the parents' right to choose. I think that's part of being American, part of being free, is having the freedom to do what you think is in the best interest of you and your family. And so I just want to clear that up. And the other side of this is I know every teacher in the school system just about. They either taught me or they're friends of mine that I graduated high school with who now come back and are teachers. One of my best friends is assistant principal. I mentioned Jay Pallas is my old coach. He's the athletics director and assistant principal at Dixon High School. I play golf with Joey and those guys. So there's nothing I would ever do or support that would hurt any of my friends. And the opposite is true. I would fight to the death to try to help them make their life better in whatever way I could and make them more successful if possible.
What would you say would, if you're lucky enough to get this position? Mary Littleton is somebody who's she is in the 78th district, which also covers part of Dixon County, and I've had the pleasure to talk to her a few different times about some of her main issues, and she tends to focus on things like child trafficking and stuff like that for kids, that sort of sort of her focus. What is a particular, area that you might try to focus in on when you get up there on the Hill?
Well, it's funny. We just talked about education. That is a key area of state government that I think is important. Again, as we mentioned, everything the state legislature does affects us directly. And what we're seeing as a nation, certainly what I think's happened over the last couple of years with COVID, you have to find a silver lining in bad things that happen to us. And the silver lining, I think, during this pandemic is with families being at home, kids having to be at home for school, and parents having to be there with them while they're doing their online learning. Parents have started kind of drilling in. They've had the time and the opportunity to drill in and listen to what's going on with their children. Listen to the education that's happening, look at the materials that they're reading, look at test questions, and see some of the stuff that we're dealing with now and you're seeing in the news about, critical race theory, pornography in school libraries. And parents are waking up. And I think that's why we've had this big kind of friction between parents and school boards throughout the country, is people are seeing some of the stuff that's gone on. Now, that stuff's not being dictated at the local level. Our local school board's not saying, hey, let's put books in our library that have pictures of people doing unsavory things. That's being passed down from the federal level with money that's tied, that has strings attached to it, that says the state, Tennessee, will give you however many billions of dollars if you adopt this reading list or you adopt this curriculum that we want you to put in place. And then the state does the same thing. Dickson County, we're going to give you this BEP money or TISA money, whatever it is, if you adopt the state's reading list and you adopt the state's curriculum. So that's one of the things that as a state legislator, state representative, I'm going to have the ability to have a say and a voice for our folks here that says, we don't want our kids to be able to go to the library and pull a book off the shelf and see images of pornography or read stories about pornography. We don't want our kids to be taught that they're somehow inferior or bad because they just happen to be born white. That sort of thing has no place in the school classroom. Part of the issue with education is our teachers are being asked to do far more than they really should be asked to do. They're dealing with issues that they're not really trained to deal with. I mean, you went to school to get your education degree. You didn't go to school to get your psychology degree. Certainly not a child psychology degree. You didn't go to school to become a lawyer, to understand what all the legal issues were that goes on in a home with parents and children and broken homes and divorce and all this stuff. And so all of these social issues that we have going on in our country, they bleed into the classroom. And so parents are having to deal with all of these social issues first before they can get to actual educating the children. And so as a state representative, what I would like to be able to do is help teachers cut through some of that and remove some of that obligation so that they can get back to focusing on what they've actually been trained to do and what they went to school to do and what they think they're called to do, and that's teach. Teachers love their kids. They love the children that come into their classroom. They want what's best for them. I don't think anybody believes that. I mean, you can pick one or two examples of bad people that end up becoming teachers or end up doing bad things, but as a whole, the profession is amazing, and they want what's best for their kids. And so, as a state representative, I want to be able to help them do what it is that they were born to do, and that's teach kids. And help them learn.
Well, we're coming up on an hour here, so I'll ask you a few closeout questions here, and I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to do this. It means a lot to me. If you were to run into somebody, and we've got a lot of cool events going on in downtown Dixon. Actually, we're just a little over a week away from the Dixon Street Festival, so you may decide to take your family out there, and you may run into some voters. If somebody were to stop you on Main Street and you only had maybe 30 or 60 seconds to give them your elevator pitch on why they should vote for you, what would you say?
Well, I'd say, hi, I'm Jody Barrett. It's nice to meet you. I'm running for state representative for the 69th District. I'm a Christian conservative, a small business owner, a father. I've been married to my wife for 25 years. And a lot of what I think is going on in Tennessee that we're dealing with, issues that we're dealing with, all start at home. And I think if we would stop focusing on the symptoms and try to get down to the root cause of what's causing these symptoms and start working on fixing our homes, fixing our home life, keeping people married, trying to raise median income. I mean, we're looking at a situation here in our district where Dixon County's median household income is half of Williamson County's. Williamson County is $112,000 a year median income. We're at 6,000. It's 42, I think, in Lewis or Hickman County. So we're in a district where people don't have the option of one parent staying home. Everybody's got to go to work because they have to make enough money in order to keep up with inflation and cost of living and everything that we have going on here. So the bottom line for me, 30 seconds sales pitch in the elevator, is we've got to fix the homes. And if we can fix our home life, Justin, then we can fix our schools. If we fix our schools, then we fix generations.
I have to agree. Give me some contact information on you. So if somebody who's listening and maybe they have a question that I failed to ask, and I apologize, I tried to ask as many things as I could think of, but if there's a question, maybe they want to reach out to you directly, or if they just want to learn more about the campaign. Do you have a Facebook page, website? How would somebody get a hold of you?
Sure. So I've got a website. It's www.jodybarrett.com. Very simple on that one. You can reach out to me through that. My email is vote@jodybarrett.com. We have Instagram @JodyBarrett for state rep. I think it's the same Twitter handle, and then Jody Barrett for state representative on Facebook. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can message me through all of those. You can send me an email, call my office if you want to. I'm pretty easy to find on Google. So, and I always look forward to opportunities to talk to people one-on-one, because people have specific issues that they're faced with that we may not be thinking of. That's something I've learned in the last 2 months being on this campaign trail, is that there are things going on in Hickman County that are specific to Hickman County that we don't think of up here. There are things going on in Lewis County. For instance, a hospital. Lewis County doesn't have a hospital. Where do you take people when you have emergency issues? So rural health is an issue there. In Hickman County, we've got this issue with the sewer system and Water Authority wanting to propose a sewage treatment plant down there. So that's a big deal in East Hickman. All of the normal stuff that we deal with, education, infrastructure, taxes, we all feel that. But every local community has their own issue that they're dealing with, and every individual within those communities has something that's important to them. And so I encourage them to reach out to me, talk to me, ask questions, educate me if I'm ignorant on something that's going on. Tell me what I'm missing.
Jody, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. It's like I said, it means a lot to me that you guys would be willing to come in and do this podcast with me. It helps me kind of build the audience, and it also gives them information to the voters. So sometimes you can sit down here and talk to me, for an hour, but it'll go out to maybe a few hundred people, and that's just like having that same conversation with several hundred people. So I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. Good luck with the campaign. Hopefully I'll see you out, at some of these cool events in downtown Dixon, like the Street Fest and some different things like that.
I'll have a booth down there. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks again, and thank you to everybody who's listening. And if you're listening and you'd like to be on the show, all you got to do is reach out, send me a message on Facebook, social media, whichever way you can find me, or email me at coachspurlock@gmail.com, and I'd love to get you on the show. Again, thanks to everybody for listening, and hope everybody has